Your paper's not long enough? Well, take a seat and old Dr. Writing with Andrew will show you how to fix that right up. When the end of a semester rolls around, it usually brings with it a really long paper. Maybe you're writing your first 10-pager or grappling with something quite a bit longer. But if you're like many of the writers I've worked with, you're stuck well short of the required length and you just don't really know what else to say. And at this point, you may even express and justify your frustration by saying that you're a person of few words, or that you just like to get right to the point. And why would your teacher even require you to write so much anyway? And listen, I get it. School is a drag, and it all feels like a chore, and it feels like an even bigger chore than it needs to be sometimes, especially when you're struggling to fill out a page count. But here's the thing. Though it may not feel like it, that long page count is your friend, and meeting it isn't actually that hard when you really understand what you're trying to accomplish. Before we get into it, let me assure you that there's no teacher on earth who would rather read a bunch of 10-page essays than a bunch of 6-page essays. You may think writing one 10-page essay is hard, but try reading and commenting on 30 of them. It'll make you feel like you're drifting in outer space and that you're never coming back. But the point is that your teacher is not assigning you 10 pages of writing because they're eager to do 300 pages of careful reading. They're assigning you 10 pages of writing in order to give you a chance to demonstrate the skills that the particular assignment is testing for. That is, when I assign a 10-page paper, it's because I want to make sure that my students have enough room to do the job I'm asking them to do. And what is that job? Well, to make some kind of argument, and then to justify that argument, showing your readers not just what you know, but how you know it. And new writers are generally pretty good at saying what they know, but they're just not as practiced at explaining how they know what they know. Now, on this front, I think the math teachers actually do a better job of explaining it. So let's imagine that you're solving an algebra problem. You get maybe something like this: 3x plus 8 equals 14. Now, you could just look at the problem and write x equals 2 and move on. But what is your math teacher going to write on your test? Exactly, show your work. And why do they do that? Well, I don't think they actually care that much about the answer. They're trying to teach you the process for solving algebra problems. They want to see whether or not you actually know the steps to take to solve a problem like this one. So instead of just writing the answer, they expect you to write out the steps, subtracting 8, dividing by 3, and then ending up with 2. And it might feel a little tedious if you can do this all in your head, but again, the real test is of your knowledge of the proper process, not just your ability to write a correct answer. And when math problems start to get more complex, being in the habit of writing out each step can help you to keep track of moving parts and catch those instances where maybe you forget a negative or misplace a decimal point. When you show your work and get the right answer, you don't just have the right answer, but a step-by-step demonstration of why your answer is the right one. On the other hand, when you show your work and get the wrong answer, you leave a trail that you or your teacher can follow to find where you made your mistake, which makes it easier to correct it the next time. And of course, you might have noticed that showing your work takes up way more space on the paper than just writing the answer. That's why math tests will often leave you so much blank paper to work out the answer. Your math teacher is trying to give you enough paper to do the job they're asking you to do, and it's not just a game of filling up half a sheet of paper with nonsense just to make it long enough. And it's the exact same thing with writing. Your job is to show your work, not just to tell your readers the conclusions you've reached, but to show your readers the step-by-step reasoning that brought you to your conclusions. So sure, you could just say, I've done some research and I think we should outlaw bell peppers, but that's the rhetorical equivalent of writing x equals 2. You've done some kind of mental process based on research, but you don't show your readers how you did it. Unless your readers already know that x equals 2, they won't be able to see how you got that answer, and in that case, they're just going to have to take your word for it. But let me tell you, people usually aren't willing to just take your word for it, especially when you're proposing something as controversial as outlawing bell peppers. As soon as you write that, you're going to have readers shouting things like, "How do you know?" or "Prove it." And these are phrases that are functionally synonymous with "show your work." So what do you do instead? Well, you don't just tell your readers what you think. You show them how you think and why you think what you think. maybe with something like this. Recent studies have pointed to pervasive societal damage rooted in the cultivation and consumption of bell peppers. For example, bell pepper cultivation has been linked to broad economic collapse, and consumption of these peppers has been shown to contribute to increased intolerance for humor, expanded disdain for social order, antisocial blogging, and friendship-disrupting borborygmus. Bell peppers, therefore, contribute to a wide range of interpersonal and systemic ills, a reality that forces us to consider an appropriate and effective response. Drawing on Crane's study of successful legislative efforts to curb the effects of celery in the 1970s, we propose a model for outlawing bell peppers in order to reduce their harms and restore an agreeable state of affairs. Now we don't just have someone who appears to be shouting unqualified opinions into the air. Instead, we get the same argument, but now the writer has shown their work, leading us through the steps they took to reach their conclusion, the sources that inspired them, and the ways in which they have made sense of those sources in order to devise their proposal. And, like when you write out your steps on a math test, showing your work in writing provides real benefits. If your conclusion is a good one, you've done yourself the favor of showing your readers the sound reasoning that has led to your conclusion. They can see what you think and how you think, and then when it all adds up, they'll be more persuaded than if you just stated your position without any justification. Or if your conclusion isn't so good, well, you've still done the good thing of being transparent. Now, instead of your readers just saying, "Nuh-uh, you're wrong and evil," they can say, "I see where you're coming from, but I think you've misunderstood the claims that Crane is making." Now you're having a real discussion, and you can see where adjustments might need to be made. None of this can happen if you're not showing your work. Of course, I'm sure you've also noticed how the showing your work version is significantly longer, but it's not longer with stuff that's just filling space. It's longer with a meaningful explanation of the point you're trying to make. It makes the same point as the first, but it makes that point better because it includes a justification rather than just an assertion. And this is the key because this is what your teachers and readers are looking for. What people think is generally less interesting and useful than how people think. And when you're writing for an assignment with a page count, your teacher is really looking for your ability to justify your thinking. Contrary to popular belief, writing teachers aren't in the business of telling you what opinions to have. At least, the good ones aren't. What they want to see is that you're able to find evidence, interpret it in reasonable ways, and then use it to justify your position, whatever it may be. Like the math test that is designed to test whether you know the process for solving algebra problems, a 10-page research paper is designed to see whether you understand the process for creating and defending an argument. And defending an argument takes up space. Explaining your thought process or showing your work just takes up space. So again, when I think about assigning a 10-page essay, it's because I'm thinking about the complexity of the rhetorical task that I'm asking students to do. And because I do want them to be successful, I give them 10 pages to work with. That's enough space to explain their thoughts thoroughly and convincingly. Because this is usually a new kind of task for writers, 10 pages gives them space to do the job I'm asking them to do without the pressures of being optimally concise. That's right, in a case like this, a 6-page paper would actually be much harder to write. You would need to make your argument, defend it, and show all your work in as few words as possible. That can be difficult even for experienced writers. So instead, we start with the more fundamental tasks. Can you make claims and defend them? And we do that before adding in the stressors of other refinements like conciseness. So resist the urge to think that you're a person of few words or someone who can make a 10-page argument in 8. Now, it's not impossible, but in the years that I've taught writing, I can think of 1, maybe 2 papers that were shorter than the required length and that actually did the job they needed to do. Statistically speaking, then, your too short paper is not outsmarting the assignment. Chances are you're missing the explanations that your teacher and readers would be looking for. Almost without exception, a paper that's too short is a paper that isn't doing its job yet. So go back through and look for places where you only assert an idea instead of explaining it. Are there spots where you leave readers room to say things like prove it or show your work? Find them and flesh out the explanation so that your readers can see how you solved the problem and not just the answer that you ended up with. Do that, my friends, and you'll be writing papers that aren't just longer, but they'll be better too. Then you won't just be tossing opinions out, you'll be making thorough, deliberate, and persuasive arguments that make your thought process explicit and show your readers how you think and why they should agree. With that as your strategy, you'll hit your page count in no time at all. When you're making an argument, it's easy to fall into the trap of not showing your work. You've been researching and thinking and outlining for weeks. You know what you think, and you know why you think it. But your readers don't. They haven't done the back-end work that you have, so they're not going to be able to see all the connections you're making unless you show your work explicitly. And this is the real reason for showing your work. Yeah, it'll help you get to your page count, but more importantly, it will help you to win over more readers. See, when you don't show your work at all, you leave it to your readers to connect the dots themselves. Some readers will probably see two ideas next to each other and figure out how they're connected, but many more will either make the wrong connection or just be lost completely. So some writers may say, well, it's obvious, and I think my readers would understand what I'm trying to say, and sure, some will. But only the most careful readers who are already inclined to agree with you will. Let's be generous and say that if you don't show your work, 60% of your readers will see what you're doing and understand what you're saying in the way that you intend. Show your work, though, by making your thought process explicit, and that number could go up to 80, 90, 98%. If you had 1,000 readers, that's the difference between 600 people agreeing with you and 980 people agreeing with you. Explaining how you came to your conclusion, making claims, and then explaining how your evidence supports your claims is a game of maximizing the number of readers who will understand what you want them to understand. Without doing that work, you will have some readers who get to the right place, but you'll have so many more with you in the end when you do show your work. The real persuasion is not just in having a good answer, but in having a good justification. A justification that your audience can then adopt as their own. So yeah, this is helpful for page counts, but the real value is in how showing your work shows readers how to think about the problem and how to think about the solution. When you have a good process and you show it explicitly, readers aren't just persuaded by your answer, they're persuaded by your process. And that, in the end, is a much deeper and more durable kind of persuasion. So get to work showing your work, and I'll see you again next time.